Hello and welcome to The Extra Mile. I'm Linda Boudreaux. Today we're going to be talking about the Louisiana Developmental Disabilities Council, and to tell us about it are SANDEE WINCHELL, who is the Executive Director, and MARCEL, who is a council member. She's a parent and a council member, and so welcome both of you.
Hi.
Hi, thanks.
Sandy, thank you for coming over from Baton Rouge to be with us today, and I know Kay, you're from Acadiana, I hear about, so it's good to have both of you here.
Glad to be here.
To start, just what exactly is the Louisiana Developmental Disabilities Council, other than being a mouthful?
The council is actually a governor-appointed body. It's 28 members, and it's an advocacy organization. We are created by Congress. There is a DD council in every state. And our purpose is to advocate on behalf of people with developmental disabilities, also to build capacity for people with developmental disabilities, and to try and affect systems change. So that's really our three main focus activities: advocacy, capacity building, and systems change.
Those are very big.
They are.
Big missions.
And we don't provide direct services. The council members actually serve in a volunteer capacity, and then we have a pretty small staff that work for the council.
Okay, so basically you are employed by the council to carry out the day-to-day operations of the council's work. Is
Exactly.
that a fair statement?
That is correct.
Okay, you've been on the council for a while now.
I have.
We say with a smile. Why are you involved in it?
Well, I have a son with a developmental disability. Joel is 34 years old now, and I learned about the council when he was quite a bit younger and was very interested in it because of the advocacy it does and the potential it has to change the service system. And when Joel was young, the service system in our state was very lacking.
Yeah.
You know, we still have a ways to go in our state, but, you know, 20 years ago, there were hardly any services for parents who had their children at home.
Right.
For adults with developmental disabilities, there was really, unless you went into an institution, you didn't have services.
We were institutionally based at that time.
Very much.
Yeah.
I mean, almost entirely.
Yeah.
And so the council I saw, when I heard about it, learned about it, I realized that they had the ability to use their very limited federal dollars to bring about the systems change that Sandy mentioned, the capacity building to create a system that could provide best practice but also quality services. And that is, you know, what we focused on. I know when I was first on the council, I focused on some of the education issues and services for children. But thankfully, the council is much broader than that, and I can say, you know, my son is employed in the community now, gets supported employment, and that was first funded in our state years ago as a demonstration project using council funds. So that's just one example of how the council has brought about systems change and capacity that's, you know, improve the lives of people with developmental disabilities.
That really impacts individual lives.
Definitely.
You know, I've jumped into this, but assuming that our whole audience knows what a developmental disability is or what it entails, but they may not. So when we're talking about developmental disabilities, what are we talking about? Who does your council serve?
We go by the federal definition, which is in our federal law that created councils, and it's really a functional definition. So it is a disability that is of lifelong duration, someone who would expect to need services over a lifetime. And it really looks at someone that would have a substantial functional limitations in at least 3 areas from a list of areas like learning, mobility, self-care, like if you're not able to take care of yourself, daily areas of life activity, various things, learning, economic, self-sufficiency. So you have to, you get evaluated and see if you meet at least 3 of these areas. You have a substantial limitation in at least 3 of those areas, and then you would meet the definition.
Do you have to have the disability at birth or before a certain age?
It's before the age of 22.
Okay.
And so that's why it's called a developmental disability, because it interferes with your development.
40, that would not, you would then not qualify for
Correct.
this particular.
Correct.
Or these programs, I guess. It's more than a program. This is a kind of an array of services. Am I right?
Right. Well, I mean, that's our council is charged with advocating for people with developmental disabilities.
Okay.
The Office for Citizens with Developmental Disabilities, they serve the same population, and they're the service providing state agency. Okay. But we are charged with advocating for this population. And as Kay was talking about, what our council does is develops a 5-year plan to decide what activities we will focus on. Pretty much does, looks at the state, looks at all the various systems, and determines what needs are out there, gets input from the public, and then develops a plan and decides where we will focus our activities on.
Okay. So what are we focusing on these days?
Well, one of the biggest priorities right now that really has been for the past 20 years or so.
This one just isn't going away, is it?
Systems change is a long-term effort. It does. It's very hard to change bureaucracies.
Very hard.
But we've made some progress.
Right. But home and community-based services. People, like Kay said, people receiving services in their own homes and not in institutions, so that they can be a part of their communities and get support in their own homes. And the council was really instrumental in starting that initiative back in 1988-89. Right now, they're home and community-based waiver services is our big focus. There is a long waiting list for those services, and we have a campaign to end the wait for those waiver services. Joel does receive waiver services. And
he does.
How long did it take him to?
10 years. 10 years. He was on the waiting list for 10 years.
Wow.
Now, I have to say, I mean, we didn't get on the list right away.
I bet most people don't, though.
They don't, but they should. You know, we didn't. And, you know, we were fortunate. I mean, it's actually when he was, you know, about to finish high school that he actually got on the list. And he got the services 10 years later.
Wow.
And for our family, you know, that was okay. There was some anxiety with that, but not too much, because we had private insurance through my husband's job. But I want to say about that waiting list, people today still wait on average almost 10 years. And that's difficult for everybody, but for some families, they can't wait 10 years. And what ends up happening is they end up having to seek an out-of-home placement, which is more expensive than providing the individualized services, for example, to keep a child living with their family.
Okay, let's take it back to what we're looking at here. So what would some of the services be?
Well, for example, Joel receives the job coach that he has that assists him with his job in the community, going 2 times a month is all it is. But the home and community-based new opportunities waiver, which is a comprehensive waiver. It's Medicaid funding, just like the funding that would go to an institution, but it's going to him as an individual for the supported employment. Okay. He also receives...
And he's also getting paid when he goes to work.
He's paid by the Iberia Parish Recreation Department. That's who he works for.
But the waiver allows him to work.
Right, and it reduces his dependence on Social Security. For every dollar he earns, it reduces his public benefit from Social Security. Other service he gets that's very important for the quality of his life, not to mention for my husband and I's and our peace of mind, is he gets individual and family support. Is what the service is called. And what that does is it provides funding for a direct support person, direct support professional, DSP, to come into our home and support Joel when we're not there.
So he lives with you?
He lives at home with us, but when my husband and I both have to be away because of work or other responsibilities.
Or you just need a time away.
And Joel needs a time away from us as an adult, that he can stay by himself. And again, I think this is a tribute to the inclusion in our family through school. He has a level of independence where he can stay by himself for certain periods of time, but not, 24 hours.
Right. Okay.
So when we're gone, the direct support professional will come in and provide the security he needs to stay, for example, overnight in the house alone, to help him with some of the tasks that he needs help with in terms of, real cooking in the kitchen. And just that safety factor that gives us peace of mind allows Joel to be more independent from us as his caregivers. Basically, and I look to the time, he will probably outlive us. These services are critical to support folks like my son to live in their home when the parents either can no longer physically do it or the parents are no longer there. He will continue his life as he knows it versus what we had 20 years ago. If the parents who were aging could no longer do it, the adult was going to an institution.
And we saw that a lot back then. I remember the Iota State School. People were going there because their parents couldn't do it anymore.
Right. And today with that waiting list, it can still happen, particularly for aging parents or for people who have really significant support needs.
So let me ask you this real quick. If you need to go to an institution, or if the choice is made to send someone to an institution, is there a waiting list there too, or is the waiting list only for community-based?
Only for the
Does that seem backwards?
It does.
In terms of just fiscal management and human dignity, it seems to me.
Right. I think it's time to change that, but that would be at the federal level.
Okay.
Of changing how the Medicaid program operates at the federal level and thus for the states. To me, the home and community-based services should either be, instead of being home and community-based, the waivers should be either a mandatory service under Medicare or at least an optional service. Then you can't have a waiting list. That's why the institutions are not a waiting list. It's an optional service that our state has opted to provide, and they did that, of course, 30, 40, 50 years ago. But it's not an option. It's not mandatory, but if your state opts for it, they can't have a waiting list for that service.
Okay.
So it is time to change that, I think. We know that the home and community-based services are more cost-effective, so that's a fiscal issue, and we know that they can provide a much better quality of life.
And that's a human issue. So when you win on both, that's like a two-for.
Right.
Did you want to say something, Margo?
Just, and you asked about some of the other services that are available, home and community-based services under the waiver for people with more severe disabilities than Kay's son Joel, maybe for people who use a wheelchair and they might need assistance getting in and out of the bed with hygiene. And especially, like Kay said, with aging parents, it is extremely difficult. And we have people on the waiting list who are still lifting their older sons and daughters in and out of bed. And this is extremely difficult. And you get to the point where people do not want to seek out-of-home placement, but physically, financially, emotionally, they get to the end of their rope. Yeah. And so they are forced to do that. if we could give them waiver services, they would choose to keep their family member at home. Or let their family member live in their own apartment. A lot of people think that people with severe disabilities cannot live in their own apartment, that they have to remain with elderly parents, and that's not the case.
And that's not always the best situation.
Right. I mean, we have lots of adults with severe disabilities living in their own apartments with roommates, and they do remarkably well with waiver supports. We have excellent providers here in the Acadiana region that support people in their own homes, apartments, houses, and they're not living with elderly parents, they're living on their own. And the waiver provides those supports.
Okay. So I'm wondering, the waiver list is so long because there's so many people on it, or because people, once they're on it, stay on it all their lives or the rest of their lives? I mean, what makes it so difficult, such a lengthy process?
Well, I mean, we need additional state match. I mean, that's the answer, is we need state appropriation for additional waiver slots.
Because people will stay, once they're on it, they stay on it for their lifetime. Is
pretty much. I mean, you would either move out of state or, like you said, for their whole life, either pass away or move out of state. Very few people voluntarily give up a waiver slot.
That's what I would think.
Right, because it's comprehensive. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, it's fabulous, and it gives a peace of mind to a family. So the issue is there's not enough, enough funding has not been directed to this program. And that's, one thing the council advocates for through its grassroots network called LACAN, Louisiana Citizens for Action Now.
Okay.
And so, we go to the state capitol every year. We're getting ready to start again with the session that starts next
right
week.
around the corner, yeah.
Starts next week to ask for an appropriation to fund some additional waiver slots so that at least some people can get off that waiting list.
So if we do waiver slots and we get people off a waiting list, don't we save money by not having as many people in institutions?
If those people would go into an institution, yes, you would.
Okay.
And, I think what some policymakers look at is, well, they haven't gone into an institution, so it does expand the budget. I think the question is, do we want to be a state that provides services to all of those who need it? Or do we want to keep talking about a waiting list of people on for 10 years? I've been fascinated by the conversations we've seen in the news recently about how, and I think everyone agrees, it's horrible that veterans coming back from the wars are staying. I've heard the folks on the news talk about they're on a list for a year.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, if only, people in our state are on a waiting list that have very dire needs for 10 years. That's not acceptable. And so, I will continue to have conversations with legislators and people in the administration that this is something that needs to be a priority.
So what are the barriers that keep it from being a priority? What do you all think? I mean, there are a lot of competing budget issues, I know that, but what do you think's making it so difficult?
I don't have the answer to that.
Seems like a no-brainer to me.
It does to us too, Linda. And I think part of it is maybe we've just been talking about it for so long, and we've tried to put a face on it for legislators. And, for example, last year there wasn't any funding made available. We've had some very difficult budget years.
We actually lost funding last year.
But it really is about, everything that government funds really is about priorities. And, people say this should be a priority, but if it's not funded adequately,
then it's not.
Then it's not a priority. And families, are struggling.
Yeah, yeah. And I know that's true because we see it all the time.
And you know, on a positive side, the state, again, I think, and I will attribute it to the council's, largely the council's advocacy, the state has reduced its institutional services.
Which also,
and that's a cost savings. But with the budget problems we've had, that cost savings, to our sadness, has not been shifted to expand this program.
but the other problem is, as they close institutions and don't provide community-based supports, it really just really reduces people's options even more.
Right. I mean, one of the things the council is focused on that maybe we should talk about now is we've reduced the state's institutional system, but the private institutional system has not been reduced.
And what is the private institutional system? What are we talking about here?
Just, well, you had the large public developmental centers, and then you have private run institutions. Okay. And the
state. Do they provide the same services?
Yes, I mean, the same similar service. You have small community homes, 4, 6, 8-bed community homes, and then you have large institutions in the hundreds. And it's still, those are institutions, but those are privately run. They're still publicly funded, but they're privately run. And we have lots of those, probably over 4,000 people in the privately
I had no idea.
Run.
I mean, we lead the nation per capita.
Per capita.
In terms of so, you know, our state has not kept pace with the national movement to even downsize and reduce the number of private institutions.
Because we're privatizing in Louisiana.
Right, but we need to privatize to people's homes. They're individual, you know, like my son gets. And how many people are on the waivers now?
The waiver, we are serving like about over 12,000 people in our home and community-based waivers. It's about over 8,000 in the New Opportunities waiver, which
that's the employment?
No, that's the most comprehensive waiver, and then about 4,000 in the other waivers. That we have a children's choice waiver just for children, and then there's an employment waiver. And then there are a couple of other state-funded programs that also people that are on the waiting list are able to access that are really beneficial, but those programs have also been cut in the last several years with the budget cuts, and so those are not as easily accessible as they have been. But before we end, we wanted to also mention a rally that we're having on the steps of the Capitol in Baton Rouge on May 1st that will be in support of the waiver to end the wait, also these state-funded programs, individual and family support, and just in general to support all home and community-based services. And it's an opportunity to speak to legislators and just bring attention to home and community-based services.
That'll be the focus of this particular rally?
Absolutely. It's a disability rights rally. We encourage everyone to come out. They can contact Families Helping Families or our DD Council and get more information on our website or give us a call. There's actually going to be a bus from this region that people can ride to the Capitol.
Oh, good. I was
free of charge.
Okay, so I guess it's Families Helping Families coordinating that?
Yes.
So if anybody's interested, call them and they can let you know when and where the bus is going to be, and you can ride up with a group of people. Any special color T-shirts we're wearing that day?
Absolutely. Our yellow rally T-shirt that I think all LeCan people are familiar with, but we encourage new members to join LeCan and join our effort to end the wait.
So for people that are on the waiting list, or perhaps they never even heard about the waiting list till they heard about this program, but if they have a child with a developmental disability, they need to get on the waiting list if they're already on, or even I'm going to be at the rally because Joel gets services now, but I want to make sure that other people have access to the supports that they need. through the waivers. So we're hoping people get there and our yellow shirts say a waiting list is not a service.
And it's not. I mean,
It's
it's not. It's
right.
not. So it really does. So that is the focus this time. But the issues surrounding meeting the needs of people with developmental disabilities continues. And so right now it's just to get that waiting list down. But I think your work is going to be going on for a while yet. I want to thank both of you for what you do, the differences that you're making, because in 20 years we've seen a lot of changes. And if everybody's voice unites, we can see even more. Kay, in the last second, what do you want to say?
just that, you know, we can make a difference. Families, advocates, individuals with disabilities themselves make a difference if they will find their voice, and they need to talk to their legislators and tell their story.
Use your voice. Thank you both so much for being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Linda.
And thank you for watching The Extra Mile.